So I will be recording the webinar so that way our future student can have something to refer back to today's information. But feel free to put your question in the Q&A box. We do have two different boxes. The first one is for the chat box. Feel free to put in any comment to the panelists, like interesting topic or what you think, what you find really fascinating. But please be sure to put your Q&A, your question to the panelists or anything specific to the topic in the Q&A box, where we'll be drawing the Q&A session from. So please don't miss the two different boxes. We'll start the session in about a minute. Okay. And do have everyone here, the panelists and the facilitator, Susie?
We are waiting for a system update for Catherine Beardman. She'll be with us in a moment, but she knows we're starting and she will join in motion.
No worries. Yeah, I can sure start a session now. We do have a few background information, introduction to go over before we can get to her portion. So yeah, we'll start. Welcome again. Our day one of the Joint Academic Mobility Week, hosted by the Global Mobility Club. So I am Mango, and I have been with GMC since the first day.
Are you starting the session?
Yes.
Okay, we're giving it a few more minutes, so I haven't unmuted on our end yet, just to let you know. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, you're good.
I know that we had said
we're waiting for Kate anyway.
So give it 2 more minutes. Also, I don't have you unmuted yet, but I will do that if you want to take it back to the main slide. Sorry. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm gonna mute on my end, and I'm gonna unmute you guys just to have things get started.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'm going to unmute.
Can I just say something before you open it up?
This is, I'm unmuted, so they can hear you, but we can't hear them right now. But I can turn it on so they can hear them.
No. I just need to make an announcement to the entire class, and then we can run with it.
Yeah, sounds good.
2 minutes.
Okay. Did you get that, May?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Okay, thank you so much for coming today. We have a special week today. This week is the JAM Week, Joint Academic Mobility events. All of you have seen the flyers. We're starting today with 10 a.m. We have speakers from various parts of the world, and we also have guests who came to us from different countries around the world. We have Global Head of Talent Mobility, Carolyn Guillermo, all the way from Singapore. At the end of the event, feel free to come up and speak with him as well about any questions that you have. All of you are kind of already have the base of what global mobility is, what international talent is all about. So I want you to approach some of our speakers, some of our guests here, and talk to them after the event. We also have the 2 ladies from the United Kingdom, from London, came to us yesterday. They are part of an organization called Forum for Expatriate Management. And we also have a guest from the Philippines, Hans, who's helping. He's part of Hewlett Packard Enterprise as well, helping Carolyn. So a couple of small announcements. You've all received QR codes. Feel free to scan and put your questions in the chat. We have students standing by, monitoring all of that. So please do that throughout the event. We have my class, IMS 3310, and we also have Professor Walden's classes and also some of the other students. My classes and Professor Walden's class, please come up at the end and sign in here for attendance. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask of students and faculty as well. Any other questions before we start? Grace, good?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna-
Hello, can you guys confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, you're live.
All right, thank you so much. Hello, welcome everyone to this lovely morning. Thank you so much for joining our Join Academic Mobility webinar, the first day that kicks off our JAM week. So we do have amazing speakers today on the topic of international career development. How can global mobility advance you and your career on today's panel? And I'm really excited for you to hear from them, listen to their amazing thoughts on this topic. And I do apologize for a few minutes delayed in starting the session, but this session is recorded. It will be available to use the students who missed the session, so don't be worried. And yeah, before we start the session, just a quick reminder of for our virtual audience out there, we do have 2 different boxes in this Zoom link. So for the chat box, you can put in any comment that you have for the panelists, comment on any topic that you find interesting. And the QR box is actually where we draw all of the questions to ask at the end or during the discussion. So please do put your questions in the Q&A box instead of the chat box to make sure that your question get answered by our panelists. That's pretty much what I have for the reminder. Let's jump start into the exciting topic right here with our panelists. So we do have 2 speakers, Anne and Kate, with our facilitator, Susie, who will facilitate the discussion over this topic. And on the right, we do have our GMC Linktree link. So if you're interested in joining our club or get excited about our future events, feel free to join our club membership. So just a quick introduction to our club. We are the Global Mobility Club at the University of Texas at Dallas. And we do host multiple events throughout the semester to kind of get people excited about the industry. And I am Mei Ngo. I am the club's president. I study global business and marketing, so I have like a long time interest in the global mobility topic. And we do have our second student leader, Nafisha, who's behind the scene coordinating and monitoring this panel right now. And she's the global business and human resource management student. Just a quick introduction to what global mobility is and why we think our students will have a lot of opportunities in the field, because it is the function within an organization that facilitates the movement of employees from one location to another. So it's a smaller section of HR and the transactional consideration of the logistic of relocation, technology, legal, and tax. So our panelists today and facilitator will dive deep more into what the industry actually really look like. Just a quick slide for you to have like a grasp of the industry. And our club is to bring global mobility industry to our UT Dallas students. And we do provide a lot of events throughout the semester, like I mentioned. We have, including this webinar, the speaker series called JAM Week, and the competition with a lot of professionals. So hopefully our students will take advantage of these amazing, meaningful relationship building opportunities. Okay, and on to our today's session, International Career Development. How can global mobility advance you in your career? I will pass it down to our facilitator today, Susie Chapman, to facilitate a discussion with our amazing panelists.
Thank you, May. So by way of introduction, as noted, I am Susie Chapman. I am the Vice President of Global Account Management for Cerba BGRS. And what that means is I have a team of directors that are responsible for the day-to-day engagement of the mobility program for the clients that they support. May gave a transactional definition of mobility, if I can just take it down one more layer. The global mobility industry is made up of corporations that have to move people around from one location to another as the result of a job or a new job or a job change. That movement can happen within a country. It can happen from one country to another. It can also happen going home after a short-term change for jobs. The different functions within the industry include those employers, the employees that get relocated, and then there are companies like mine, and we're the ones that are the outsourced provider of movement for those employees. We take care of all of the logistical and transactional services, as well as providing strategic guidance to our clients to assure that they are providing a program that is compliant, that achieves equal and appropriate services to the employees within their care, that they are then given into our care. A little bit of my background. I currently live in Northern Virginia. As you can see, I did note that I'm here with my husband and my ancient Cocker Spaniel. He's almost 14, and I guarantee you he will bark during this session. The other information about my sort of who I am is there. I think just as a brief story, if I can share with you, I was just talking to one of our panelists. It was 2003 when I took my first short-term international assignment, which was from Connecticut to Singapore. I fell madly in love with Singapore. It's a place that is very easy to live and navigate and spend time in. I had the great fortune of being able to bring my daughter with me. At the time she was 14. And she was able to, travel around the city and see sights and eat local food all day long while I was at work. And the great experience of that was on the weekends, we would go on different travel experiences to countries in the region, whether it was taking a taxi to Malaysia or a ferry to Indonesia, or taking a flight to another country that had to be traveled to by air. It's one of the pure joys that I got from being able to experience mobility. With that, if we can move along, May, if you can advance the screen. Thank you. We have two panelists with us today. I know you saw their brief information on that opening slide, but Anne, if I can hand it over to you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. Thank you, Susie. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Anne Kubricki. I'm currently a regional HR business partner here at Netflix. Just a title to say I partner really closely with our engineering, product, legal, and talent functions. I moved to Singapore a year ago with my family, and I am in the middle of an 18-month assignment. And I was telling Susie, I'm actually sitting in Thailand, so the time difference worked in my favor to be with you all today. For hobbies and all that, you can see it on the slide. But if I wasn't in HR, I am an aspiring wine sommelier, or I would try to own a children's bookstore. But excited to be here with you all today. And I'll pass it on to Kate.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, super. So hi, everybody. Happy to be here with you today. So I work for Novartis, specifically Novartis Gene Therapies, and I'm the head of People and Organization, which is a fancy way to say HR, for both region Europe as well as our international region, which is essentially Asia Pacific, China, Japan, Middle East, and Africa. And I currently live in Basel, Switzerland. I've been here since June. We actually moved during the pandemic, which was interesting. I live here with my family, husband, dogs, cats, fish, whatever else we brought with us. And my favorite outcome of being globally mobile is, I think I've been mobile since I've been moving around since I was 15. between Europe and the United States. And I would say just a massive appreciation for what global mindsets bring to the table. And of course, you have to say traveling, because that's the other amazing part of being mobile. I love in my free time, which I have very little of, to be quite honest these days. But when I do have free time, it's puttering around, as my husband would call it, and doing the things that are on the screen. I have lived in Sweden twice. I do speak Swedish. It is not very useful. The Swedes speak perfect English, but I do speak Swedish. Switzerland, Utah, Arizona, Idaho, Michigan, and have moved, I think it's 12 times, but it's probably more. I think I've just lost count by now, to be honest. And if I wasn't in HR, I would likely be a psychologist or a guidance counselor of some sort, or maybe an entrepreneur, maybe.
Thank you, Kate.
Mhm.
So diving directly into our session, thinking about the relationship between global mobility and talent acquisition. And can I ask you to opine on this briefly to kick us off?
Yeah, of course. So when I think about this question specifically, I think about our internal talent. And so if I'm thinking about assignments and the opportunities to invest in the employee base, I think assignments are a very attractive opportunity for individuals who are interested in it. I would also say it adds to the base of the employees themselves. And so if there are opportunities and we open them internally, being able to move people around and those individuals are able to build their own networks as well as expand their experiences, it just makes them much more well-rounded employees. And I also think just an appreciation for what it's like to work in other geographies as well. So for me, the mobility piece is super key for the engagement and growth element. I also think that when we've been hiring individuals, the fact that we're in so many different countries is also super attractive, just because I think people do enjoy working with global audiences and expanding their horizons in that way.
Thank you, Anne.
Sure.
Kate, perhaps as you provide some insight here, having been both the mobility leader previously and HR currently, if you can talk very specifically about that relationship on both sides.
Sure. Relationships on both sides. So maybe first I will talk about it from the mobility lens in a company. And so I ran global mobility for 2 large Fortune 100 companies prior to moving into business partnering. And what I will tell you is from a talent perspective and from a development perspective, talent who is globally mobile and who has had experiences outside of their home country tend to be talent that has a greater appreciation for working globally in cross-functional teams, highly matrixed organizations, and tend to be adaptable when it comes to, I mean, obviously relocating around the world, you have to be adaptable, or you learn how to be adaptable, I should say. And that makes for an employee who can adapt to various situations in a working environment, because a lot is thrown at you when you're a globally mobile or mobile person moving around the world. So from a talent perspective, on the mobility lens, inside a company, people who tend to move and have multiple global experiences in different regions of the world tend to be people who want leadership experiences, want to engage with different cultures and experience different things and try new things. So that is definitely from a talent lens perspective. Not many people are mobile sometimes. And so it gives a lot of people a leg up on talent discussions on talent who is mobile and is or has been mobile in the past. It definitely rises people to a different level of visibility in an organization from a talent perspective. Me personally, being mobile and having moved for my company multiple times, I would say that having mobile experiences early in my life as an exchange student, actually in high school and onward, has set me up in a way, probably from how I look at the world, as well as being mobile. Thank goodness my family is open to me dragging them around the world, but has set me up in a way to be given opportunities that potentially I wouldn't have been, and grown in a way that has grown my career on a fully different level than I would have been able to had I not been mobile.
Thank you for that. I think the big clues that the audience will have heard there from both of these responses is raising your hand and saying yes is a way to advance your career, and raising your hand and saying yes is also a way to advance your personal point of view about the world. So thank you both for that. Moving forward, as we think about where we are, May, if you could advance the screen, where we are right now in the global space as it relates to diversity and inclusion, the global reactions to some of the challenges with social justice that have occurred over the recent few years, particularly during pandemic. There's a whole conversation around global mobility, advancing diversity and inclusion. And May, I'm sorry, I don't know if your screen is dragging, but we're not seeing the next screen come up. There you go. Thank you. So something that's important to think about from a diversity and inclusion lens is, if I look at this very much through a US domestic mindset, here in the US, there was a study done back in 1976 that said that people who participated in the presidential election back then, over 75% of reporting counties did not give either presidential candidate a landslide victory. And as a direct comparison, in the 2016 election, presidential election, over 80% of reporting counties did give either one candidate or the other a landslide victory. Why I share that statistic with you is to say that over the last several decades, in most countries around the world, we have begun to live and work and go to school and church and local community activities with people that are very much like who we are in our home locations. So picking somebody up and moving them to a different location creates diversity and allows for the opportunity for very intentional inclusion from a global mobility perspective. So thinking that through, Kate, if I could ask you to provide some insights from your lens around global mobility, advancing this diversity and inclusion initiative at Novartis.
Yeah, I mean, I can actually speak to it. It's from whether it's Novartis or honestly any other company, to be quite honest, is that global mobility obviously expands everybody's experiences of how they experience the world, how they experience different cultures, different perspectives, and also how their experience, how their viewpoint changes and adapts. And so from an inclusion perspective, it's not just obviously about, having diversity as maybe how it used to be defined 20, 15 years ago. It's diversity of thought, right? It's diversity of experiences. It's diversity of backgrounds, of upbringing, that when you have these mobile experiences and you have people coming together from all over the world with different backgrounds, different lenses they look through, the ability to problem solve, innovate, and create is exponentially increased to the benefit of not only, of course, the organization, but to the employees themselves. And so that's, from my perspective, where mobility plays such a massive role in bettering organizations' capabilities to solve problems, right? Innovate and create.
Thank you for that, Kate. And Anne, I'll ask the question through the lens of Netflix, who of course are an organization that has deep roots embedded in diversity and inclusion, but also from your personal experiences, having gone back and forth across the Pacific so frequently.
Yeah, sure, of course. And so I do think nowadays a career is less a ladder and definitely more like a jungle gym, and you're going different directions. And I do think an assignment offers that growth that maybe a promotion doesn't. The other piece that I really like to just maybe remind people as well is if we're able to hire internally, rather than externally. I think that it's always a benefit to both the organization and the employee. And so whenever we've moved people around, it's usually a stretch assignment, and it's filling, a desire that they have to fill a gap that they might have. Maybe it's the first time they're living outside of really the US, because that's a lot of where our current employee base is. But if we're able to just have better, stronger employees and be able to offer these experiences, we would always want to make sure that we're targeting our internal employees first. I think the other thing too is just making sure that it's global mobility done right. And what I mean by that is making sure that the opportunities themselves are done and posted, and it is an equitable access to the opportunities. And so I do think it has a diversity inclusion lens from that angle as well. And it's just making sure that the systems in place are supporting that.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Sure.
May, if you could advance the screen. One of the things that we have spent some time talking about is organizations, particularly Fortune 500s, particularly global US-based multinationals. The HR imperative, as defined through HR leadership, has been to further diversity and inclusion in each of their organizations. And global mobility, this is our chance to do that, right? Sending people around the world enables that advancement of diversity of employees. And also it advances the leadership capabilities of those managers that get to learn how to be far more inclusive as functional managers, with that consideration for the different points of views coming into their teams. So the other piece here, for those of you looking to advance your personal experience with global mobility, think about it through that lens of how coming into an organization enables you to advance the diversity and inclusion initiatives at that top HR level. May, if you could advance the screen again, there's the next part of this discussion that we wanted to dig into is the personal considerations in the industry. And so the complications of working with human beings all day. When we are moving human beings around, there's a lot of personal sort of elements of that, whether it's moving somebody with a family, moving somebody that has, decades or generations of sentimental items, or moving people that are very close to their extended family that live in their departure location, and how we navigate some of that to assure that we are taking care of the human being through the move. And that all of those elements are considered. Anne, can I ask for your thoughts and feedback in this space?
Yeah, of course. So Susie and Kate both know it was moving me as one human plus 3 others. So I've got 2 toddler girls who are 3 and 5, and a husband. And for us, one of the big personal considerations was just their education. We were in a really great school that took forever to get into. So for us, it really was a factor in whether or not to go and what kind of schools there would be in Singapore. I would say the team that helped move me was fantastic to help mitigate any concerns. I'd never looked at schools in Singapore before, really knew what I was looking for. And so I appreciated that they were just so patient with all the questions I had, and we were able to do a lot of it virtual because it was still during COVID. I would say the other thing too that we weighed as a family was how easy or difficult it would be for my partner to work as a dependent pass holder in Singapore, which it's actually very difficult. And so we also had to take that into consideration. And I guess I'd be kind of amiss if I didn't also mention we have a dog. So we have a Shiba Inu puppy. And so that actually ended up being the hardest thing to navigate, if I'm being totally honest, just because there's quarantine and all these rules that we didn't know about. And so I think one of the things I would just say is just being really flexible, that like no plan is going to go according to plan. And when you think you have got it all figured out, something else happens. But I do think our family has a really nice sense of adventure. And so we really do try our best to just roll with things as best we can.
Thank you, Anne. Kate?
Sure.
Yeah, I would say that, sorry, it's late here and they're trying to clean my office. I would say that, Anne actually covered it nicely, but I would just say, from considerations from my side and from my multiple experiences would be just give yourself a lot of grace in the process, and also frequent check-ins on how we doing, how's everybody feeling, right? How is this landing with everybody? Because I guarantee, at least in my situations, my husband knows that my company could probably ask me to go to Timbuktu, and I would be like, yeah, let's do it. And my family may not feel quite the same. And so I would just say, you know, staying really, really connected. But I also think the other piece is actually really way earlier in the process, is when you're talking about thinking about being globally mobile, is talk to your partner about what does that look like for them, right? What does that look like? Is that something you think about, want to do? With maybe we should agree on how we feel about this, timing. Because as a legacy, and I know that Susie's seen this a million times as well in her mobility career, is that so many times things have come up where one partner is absolutely for it and the other partner is no way, or the kids say no way, and it becomes a really can be way more challenging. So have those conversations early, right? So you feel confident if they do come up, not a surprise where someone's going to have to need the time for themselves to think about it.
Thank you. So here on the screen, there are some items that we talk through as being those family and personal situations that come up from a mobility perspective. There's things we talked about, Anne's decisions around her children. Both of these speakers come from families and brought their families with them. There is a whole part of this area of global mobility that is unique in the experience of relocating female executives as something that's maybe newer for certain countries that we relocate people to, based on some of the country customs and norms. There's this thought process out there that it's easier to relocate or take an assignment when you're single versus married or married with children. That's not necessarily the case. It really just depends on the unique individual that we're moving. And I just want to call out why we spent a minute talking about diversity and inclusion before this section is because that is an impact. Gender roles are looked at through a different lens depending on which country you go to. And so Kate, if I can come back to you to speak a little bit more personally to that space to help shine a light on this issue.
So it's interesting that, I mean, and it's been interesting for me in this way for a really long time. So my unique family makeup is my husband stays home, and I call him the CEO of our house. But he stays home and manages the house, and I will, and depending on where I've moved in the world, typically when I'm in situations, whether it's a banking situation or an immigration situation, they always go to my husband to ask the question on decisions, whether it be setting up accounts or taxes or what have you. And so what especially women may find, depending on where you move in the world, is it is still not the norm in some cases for the woman to be maybe the executive or to be the person that is moving. Usually it's still out there. They think it's the man. And so that has, when my husband, we joke about it constantly. My husband will look at them and he'll go, "You need to talk to her." and we do joke about it, but it's real. It still happens, and it happens all the time. And even in places in Europe where you feel like you're living in a pretty sophisticated, country, it's definitely still exists. So don't be surprised, don't be offended, but just be prepared.
Thank you. I think that for each of us, when we take our mobility experiences, it really is an opportunity for us to help to further the cause. And then my last note here is, as we become employees in organizations that relocate us around the world, to remember to collaborate with our HR partner, to attend to our individual unique family makeup. Both Ann and Kate represent HR on this session, and they would agree that their job is to help to facilitate what makes the most sense for a unique individual as that unique individual is taking their opportunity. Moving forward, thinking about different ways that mobility is achieved. So in my career, for example, I have taken permanent US domestic relocations. I've taken temporary US domestic assignments and also temporary international assignments. And so what is that all about? And I think really what's happening is organizations have an appetite to take particularly employees that might be younger in their career or on a leadership and development track, and apply unique mobility experiences to them to help to grow the future. And what that may do as well in terms of potential candidates like yourselves that are looking for opportunities with a company like this. And I think you have really unique perspective here in that you are in the middle of one of these now. So if you could perhaps provide some insight and thought to this question.
Yeah, happy to. I should have probably said sooner, but this is my second time in Singapore. And so when I graduated from a grad program in HR, I joined Hewlett Packard, and they had a rotational program, and so had the chance to spend about 9 months in Singapore. It's been now over a decade ago, but it was one of these rotational programs. So that for me was one of the pull factors for that company specifically, just because I felt like I was going to be working with really wonderful HR people who had been in the industry for ages, but get this experience in Asia of working at a global company, which I think is very different and unique. So I'm now currently in Singapore again for the second time and have about 6 months left on the assignment. Netflix as a company has been really invested in wanting to go more local. So we haven't been global that long, and earlier said that a big part of our employee base is still based in Los Gatos and LA. And so how can we be evolving our culture so that it has all these local nuances, it makes sense, it translates. And then in other places, we've been doing a ton of hiring, and how can we help these employees feel like they are part of the company, and understanding maybe how some of these shorthand and tenets of our culture, how they show up. And so for me specifically, I've been at Netflix, it will be 5 years in January. I was an easy yes when the opportunity came up because of the investment we're making globally. But I also felt like it was an investment in me as a professional, just because the first stint I had been so long ago. And I thought it would be really wonderful to see how it is, doing this with a family. And so long answer, but for me, I would say different points in my career, but have always found the opportunity to go abroad and just broaden the perspective, and just be sure that the way I work doesn't feel so US centric has been something really special. And so really appreciate Netflix for the opportunity.
Thank you, Anne. And Kate, thinking specifically about your experience in Sweden, but of course also both from an HR and talent perspective, can you provide some thoughts here?
Yeah, so first, what I would say is my first professional rotation was actually a short-term assignment, and it was to Sweden. And funnily enough, obviously they were fairly confident that I could do it. But the reason why I think, even discussed in the first place, because I was I think, one of the very few people in the organization that actually spoke Swedish, funnily enough. And so that was, I think, one of the factors. Of course, there's many. And I was mobile, and they knew I would be mobile for just a short term, and I was willing to take my family with me, and they were willing to come. So I think it is maybe one other factor that I would share with you was I made it very well known in my organization I was mobile, right? I'll move. Where do you want me to go? Right. And so when those talent discussions came up for a short-term assignment, they knocked on my door. Obviously it was more complicated than that, but it's the easiest way to describe it. So I think that networking within your organization with leaders that are in your sphere, making sure they know, A, what your capabilities are, but B, what your preferences are as well is super important. Because if, for example, they didn't know I spoke Swedish and they didn't know I was mobile, I probably wouldn't even have been part of that discussion. So maybe that's what I will add, just from advocating for yourself in those scenarios is super important, as well as just knowing what you're willing to do from a mobility lens.
Thank you. So I think the kind of the punctuation here is just really thinking about how, and actually Anne closed her session making a gratitude statement for Netflix for giving her this opportunity. And really, I think what I found experiencing this as well was that I tended to be more engaged with my company, and I experienced more tenure than I might have otherwise because of being able to take experiences like this. So moving forward, I'm going to give everybody the hint that the next slide is our last formal slide, and then we want to spend some time answering questions. So get your questions ready. But thinking about what's next. I was young in my career when I raised my hand and took the first opportunity I had to experience global mobility, and I would never do it differently. I think the only thing I would change in my career is raising my hand more often because of the richness of experiences that it brought me. But the other piece of experiencing global mobility for everybody to keep in mind is you can do it. And then once you've done it, you can do it. And so keep doing it, keep looking for opportunities, invest in this great experience that the University of Texas is giving you in getting exposure to this field, because it doesn't really exist anywhere else. To the point where I think there are a lot of people who are in my chair who look at this thinking, wow, how amazing, and too bad I didn't have that experience. It would have given me a leg up. So, take the moment to be inspired by the experiences and careers of Kate and Anne, and look for opportunities as you go forward to try to experience these things as well. Kate, any closing comments from you?
No, I think that's really well said. I'm just looking forward to hearing from the audience.
Anne?
I would just underscore the raise your hand, ask lots of questions, and I think really challenge yourselves to think about what can be. And I think you probably heard a little bit of that from this panel.
Thank you. All right, turning it over for questions.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so we do have quite a few questions collected from our students who are joining the session in the auditorium right now. So I will start off with the first one from Catherine. She asked, was there something the location team could have done better to help with your transition? And I don't think the question was directed to any specific panelists. So anyone can take that.
Well, I would say for me, not to be in the middle of a global pandemic would have been fantastic. It took us, I think, 18 weeks to get our shipment of our furniture and household goods. So that was a really long time to be without bicycles and things. But no, but in all seriousness for us, I think my biggest lesson is that while global mobility teams are absolutely your partner, and your advocate in the process, they're not miracle workers. So you do have to have a level of reasonability and flexibility and understanding. And also, again, that whole advocating for yourself and what you need within reason is super important.
Thank you.
I hope we answer your question. The next one is, I think we spent quite a few time to go over this topic, but a question from Alena is, can working internationally advance all careers? What careers are the best to start in global mobility? I think she's asking more of like the entry level job of how do you get your foot in the door of the this exciting industry.
So to come into the global mobility industry, it's a kind of a confusing question to ask, not really, but bear with me for a moment. The opportunity exists to work for one of the companies that provides support in the industry. So a company like mine, Serva BJRS, or one of the many secondary and tertiary providers that offer support to global mobility providers as we support the companies that we care for. There's lots of opportunities there. And the answer to the question just becomes looking at job boards. And that gives the information and exposure to the mobility industry. But people in any discipline have an opportunity to experience mobility through a corporate entity that they may be employed by. So coming into a company that has a global footprint, that has a global mobility function, and Kate made the statement that she made it very well known across her leadership team that she was ready and was interested in mobility. And so getting your foot in the door in a job that fits your discipline and raising your hand and saying, I am somebody that is happy and excited to be globally mobile, offers that chance to further it. If the focus would want to ultimately be from a long-term career perspective in this global mobility space, and you want to work on the corporate side, then certainly coming in from an HR or subspecialty of talent is a strong way to go. I would say when I look at the 40 clients within my current portfolio, probably 38 of them house mobility in the talent function.
Yeah, and thank you so much for answering that question. I think that answered really well. If Anne and Kate, do you have anything to add to that, or I can move to the next question? Okay. So the next one I get is from Tayden, and she directed to Anne to answer this question. How do you land your job to be located in Singapore? Did you get the job in the US, then they relocated you, or just directly to Singapore at the beginning?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I started in our Los Gatos office, and I was there before we even had a presence in APAC. We had an office in Tokyo, but it was not really considered our hub. And so started in Los Gatos, and then like Kate was also really vocal about if there was an opportunity to go outside the US. I was completely open to anywhere. I'm okay with, well, mostly anywhere. And so I would say the opportunity for Singapore was more of an obvious one, just given where I was at personally. Unfortunately, I only speak English. And so I also wanted to go to a place where I'd be able to get around well, and then also be able to operate, in their business language as well. So then they relocated to Singapore, but it was also where the opportunity was, and less me getting to choose.
Thank you, Anne.
Sure.
And the next question that we get was having a marry prevent you from accepting a global position? And I think it was one of the main topics that we discussed earlier. If you want, if anyone want to elaborate more and I think this question was kind of sent like when we were having that topic, but I kind of missed it until now. So if anyone want to, yeah, I'm so sorry, but if anyone can elaborate a little bit more on that, then we can move to the next one.
To clarify, May, the question was being a family size of
Yes.
2 or more, was that whether or not it was a hardship to
Yeah, was having a family prevent you from accepting a global position? So that was the question.
Sure.
Well, I think that's a really personal decision, first and foremost. And so I definitely don't think it prevents you. I think we kind of hit on it maybe a little earlier, having and being on the same page with your partner on what that looks like for them. And if they're on the same page with you is the most important factor. On all my global assignments, I've been married with kids. And it's not been a preventative factor for us to move, but my husband, happy or not, he's willing to come with me wherever I go. So I think it's just the alignment personally, privately with your partner.
Yes, and I think so too. So thank you, Kate, for answering that question. The next one that we get is really interesting. Do you believe that growing virtual workspaces will limit the global mobility that future workforces will have access to? What would it take for a company to stop offering global mobility?
I think there's a couple of different perspectives to this. And of course, Kate and Anne may want to opine, but my thought is the world is getting smaller and the need to be globally fluent, I think, is getting more and more important, whether or not there's a need to have a position in a different country than the one that you may be from or may be residing in. And so while jobs are becoming right now, in many cases, more hybrid or virtual, there still is that real need or desire or appetite or requirement from a corporate global perspective to be able to look at things across cultures, to understand and appreciate the experiences of employees in different locations around the world, to be able to understand where somebody may be truly coming from, not necessarily the country, but their culture and their cultural norms. And also an understanding of how to be successful doing business in a country other than the one where the organization may be headquartered. So I think there will always be some need for global mobility activity. There's also a secondary element of this related to tax compliance. For a company to do business in a certain country, they have to have an office there. And if they don't have an office there, there's potential risk at that corporate tax level. And so in order to do that, you have to have people, and some of them may come from a different location. So I think there's a clear statement that the need for global mobility and how it's achieved is changing, but I don't think it's going away. Anne or Kate?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is it's also cultural. And what I mean by that is the idea of working virtual or being hybrid might not translate as well in some countries. And even if it's in the same company, if you were to ask that question to someone who maybe is working in the Bay Area, I think you would get a very different answer than someone who's maybe working in our Tokyo office, for example. And so I do think part of it too is going to be driven by like an employee's appetite to be in the office and to have that connection and to be building the relationships, maybe more so than those that are more task oriented or task focused.
Thank you, Anne.
Sure.
Kate, do you want to add anything to that? We're hitting 4 minutes before the session, and so I might as well just finish up with the last few questions. And speaking of this question, I just want to remind, really interestingly, our second day of Jam Week will be about the work from anywhere topic. So this question is actually perfect for our next session, which happens tomorrow from 2:45 to 3:45. Just throw it out there so people can get a clearer, more answers when you attend tomorrow's session. The question I have here is, and I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, for anyone with the children, how does traveling and relocating impact them? For example, new schools and new friends. Yeah.
So I'll just share briefly. I've moved my kids a number of times. My oldest has probably attended, I don't know, 4 or 5 6 different schools. But none of those moves I did without her, like, how do you feel about this? right? And now my oldest, who's 14, is like, where are we going next? Right? She's excited. I think what I can tell you in some is that parents tend to be the most worried about how their kids are going to adjust, and each family is different and different kids have different needs, of course. But generally speaking, what I would tell you is kids, I have found, actually tend to be more adaptable and resilient than the parents. And so that's generally been my personal experience as well as professional experience.
Go ahead, Anne.
I was gonna say, I absolutely agree, Kate. I feel like the kids are much cooler than I was at their age. And I think there's something about this being really time bound as well, as we really are trying to maximize the time we have here. And so even if I'm, getting worried about what might happen, I still go for it. And it has always been just amazing trips and opportunities. So yeah, I couldn't agree more, Kate.
Thank
The
you,
only
Anne.
comment I would add to that is, since I'm a little bit older than these two speakers, my daughter experienced mobility with me quite a few times when she was younger, her first international when she was 14. And what I would say is she is now, an adult raising children who is very globally, culturally fluent and mindful, and has taken on a career that takes global cultures and languages into account. So taking kids on assignment pays off pretty well as they become adults living in this smaller and smaller global world.
Yeah, I can probably speak it for myself too, but just for the time restriction, we're hitting 11 a.m. right now, and I don't want to waste our panelists' time. So thank you so much for such an amazing panel with a lot of information that will sure our student will take advantage from and benefit a lot from these thoughtful discussion. So thank you so much everyone for joining our today's session. On the screen right now is our recap slide of the panel. So we do still have another webinar tomorrow, so please make sure to RSVP with the code there to join our discussion tomorrow about the topic of work from anywhere. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Good
Thank
luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Susie. Bye, Kate.
Mobility Career Fair on Thursday, November 10th. You will have, or